Greetings. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the Brightspace Gradebook Setup Wizard. This is essentially the tool you will use to establish the basis and the grading system you're going to use for your course. So let's take a look. You want to be sure that you are indeed in your Grades tool and on the Setup Wizard tab. The first page you'll see here is essentially the defaults that Brightspace has set up for you, and we'll talk about each of them in detail as we move through the 7-step process. To get going, press Start. And here is the first page. And this is the one thing, whether you choose a weighted points or formula system, you do not want to change once you start putting in grades, because it can really befuddle the calculations. So essentially a weighted system, you will create categories, things like quizzes, writing prompts, or project, and each of those categories will carry a certain amount of weight towards a total grade. In a points-based system, every item in your grade book is going to be assigned a certain number of points, and the student grade will be based on how many points the students received divided by the number of overall points available. And then a formula grading system is a little bit more complex, usually based on a specifications type, or if there are a certain number of criteria that a student needs to succeed at, then you can build sort of a custom book that will calculate the student's grade based on those criteria. In this example, we're going to use a weighted system. And what can really make this helpful is to have a copy of your syllabus and the grading system that you're going to use nearby. So as the questions arise as we go through this 7-step process, you'll be able to make the appropriate choice easily. And continue to move on to step 2. The step 2 is the final grade released. And this is not the final grade that happens at the end of the semester, but the column sort of in the grade book. So a calculated final grade will allow you to let the student see a running total of when they're in the class. So every time they hand in an assignment and you release the grade, they'll be able to see how they're doing in the overall course. Sort of keeps a running total of their grade calculation, which can be really helpful to let a student know where they are standing in the course. And an adjusted final grade, that means that you will actually have to input a grade, make the adjustments to the grade if you wanted to, and then release that grade. So it's a much more manual and professor controlled process. And there would be no problem with using the calculated final grade through the first part of the course and then shifting later to an adjusted final grade if you didn't want those grades to be visible as you got closer towards the end of the semester. And then in order for that automatic process to happen, you want to make sure you're automatically releasing the final grade by clicking this box here. And what that does is every time you enter a grade, Brightspace will do the math based on the calculations and percentages that you've established, and then push that out so students can see the grade. When you decide what you're doing here, you can click Continue to move forward. The grade calculations, these 3 boxes here. The first is to drop ungraded items. And essentially what that does is if you've got, let's say, 10 items in your course and you've pushed out a grade on the first one, what the student will see in their running total is, the basis of that first grade. And so if they got 100% on that quiz or that assignment, they'll see right now that they're running 100% in the course. To treat ungraded items as 0, and again, using that example that we have 10, essentially they would get 100% on that first item, and then Brightspace would do the math figuring in 9 more zeros. So you can see that it would take quite a bit of time for a student to get sort of a passing grade and not feel that panic like, oh my gosh, why am I doing so poorly in this course? Now, in the event, say on the second assignment, a student does not hand that in, you can then put a 0 in the grade book and Brightspace would do the math accordingly with that as a 0. So just kind of let you know the difference between those 2 items. The second one here is to automatically keep the final grade updated. And you'll want to do that. So every time you push out a grade, Brightspace will do the math for you, and then you can put that calculated grade out for the students to see. And it can continue. Now, grade schemes in Brightspace are essentially ways to display grades to students. So, and you can create these. So you could create a grade scheme that is a pass and fail based on the percentage and how they do in the course. Or you can create a scheme that is A, B, C, D, and E, and then you can set marks where those images would display. So whatever you wanted to share and display to the students, you could create a scheme for that to happen. Now you can create one for the overall course, and then you could actually use different schemes for individual items if you wanted to. So essentially, a grade scheme is a visual representation to help students interpret their grades. And percentages are the default. And once you've decided which one you wanted to go with, you can click Continue. This is a very easy step. You are essentially just deciding how many decimal places that you are going to have in your grade book. And you can do up to 5, but 2 is the default and a pretty good way to see how your students are doing. Step 6 is actually managing what the students will see in their individual grade books. So the points grade, so they'll see how many points they got out of how many points available. The weighted grade, depending on how you set up your categories, they will see how much that grade is worth in the overall gradebook plan. And here is the grade scheme symbol. So in this instance, since we chose percentages for our grade scheme, this is going to be the symbol that students would see. Now, if you had created other grade schemes and then chosen one of those grade schemes as your default, then they would see that A, B, C, or the pass-fail as we had talked about earlier. And just to let you know that in individual grade items, these views can be overridden, and you can just choose one of the 4 if you wanted to just show that for an individual grade item. So there is some adjustment that you can make per item. This just sets it for the overall grade book. And then again, the grade scheme color, these will be colors like red, yellow, green, and blue. And again, when you build grade schemes, you can choose the color that you're going to use for each of those if you choose to use it at all. And again, anything you don't want to use, you can uncheck and remove from the student view. Again, you can display 1 or 2 decimal places for your students so they know what they're at. And any character displays like tops of columns or how you're going to work into grade schemes, the default is the 50. You probably won't need any more than that for any of your categories, so it's a safe place to leave it. And then the final grade calculation, this one can be a little confusing. Essentially, what that does is display sort of an image of a calculator for students so that if they wanted to actually see the math of how their grade was calculated, they would be able to click on that and do so. And for our students this time, we're going to make that possible. And then you'll click Continue when you've completed your choices. And when you get to step 7, you just want to essentially go through and check all your settings to see that they are set where you intended them to be set. And when you're complete and satisfied with that, you can click Finish. And as promised, if you move up here to the top to this settings menu, you can click that. And there you can see all the settings we sort of just went through, and this is where you could make some changes and adjustments if you wanted to. The personal display options and how your grade book is going to appear to you. The org display options here will show your student view and so forth, so you can make some final adjustments to those. And finally, your calculated options. Again, be careful here changing your weighted or point system because it can affect what grades are in your grade book. So that's really important to pay attention to. But you can move between a calculated and adjusted final grade here as well. So just wanted to let you know that those options were there, and we end up in our Manage Grades category, and this is where we'll begin to add new items and categories to build out your grade book. But we'll do that in another video. Thank you and have a great day.